Hey guys, my name is Shane, and today I'm going to be telling you the story about how I almost died from getting my eggs frozen. So for those of you who don't know, I am female to male transgender. I was born female. Obviously, I'm not female anymore. I've been on hormones for over 2 years now. I've had top surgery for over 2 years now. And a little bit over a year ago, in December of 2019, I decided that I wanted to get an egg freezing procedure. So just to explain a little bit what that is and why I chose to do it, it's not a surgery that every trans guy gets, but I wanted to get it because I wanted to have the ability and the choice to have biological children in the future if I wanted to. I have no intentions of getting pregnant and delivering a child myself, obviously. I can't even physically do that anymore because I've already had a hysterectomy. But even if I hadn't, I would still never do that in a million years. And for a long time, I didn't think that I would even want kids, but as I've been getting older, I'm almost 23 now, I've been thinking about how maybe I will want kids in the future, I don't know. And I found out that there was kind of a way to have biological kids as a trans guy without actually getting pregnant myself. By getting an egg freezing surgery, they basically take my eggs and freeze them so that they can be fertilized later on if I so choose. And in order to do that, I would have to use a sperm donor, but that's something that I'll worry about later on. It is a surgery. I did have to go under anesthesia for it, but I'm pretty sure it only took like 15 minutes. It's not super invasive. And so even though it was not cheap and insurance does not cover it, I decided to go through with it because I wanted to give myself the option. However, things didn't really go as planned. The surgery itself went perfectly fine, actually. The whole process of the surgery was a pain. Ideally, you should get this surgery before going on hormones as a trans guy. I had been on hormones for over a year at that point, but I only just started considering doing the surgery. But it's not impossible to get the surgery done if you've already been on hormones. I just had to go off hormones for about 2 months. The 2 months leading up to the surgery were a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of blood work, all these tests. I was having like a doctor's appointment every week. In like 2 weeks leading up to it, I was literally having a doctor's appointment like every other day. I remember on Thanksgiving, I had to go home early because I had a doctor's appointment the next day at 7 in the morning. Luckily, the doctor's office was only like a 10-minute walk from my apartment at the time, so that was convenient, but it still just kind of sucked having to go to the doctor like almost every day because I had to constantly be checking my blood work. And 10 days before the surgery, I had to start taking these hormones in order to, I guess, make my ovaries release as many eggs as possible. I don't really remember exactly how the medications worked. All I know is that I was supposed to inject several different medications into my stomach the days leading up to the surgery because they were basically prepping my body for the surgery and making sure that they would be able to harvest as many eggs as possible. So I was on 3 different injections. One of them was called Leuprolide, the other one was called Gonal F, and the last one was called Ganirelix. I don't remember which one was which. All I know is that 10 days leading up to it, I had to take one of the injections every day, and then like 5 days leading up to it or something, I had to start taking the other injection at a certain time every single day. So I was doing 2 injections a day. It wasn't really that big a deal because I already do the testosterone injections every week. So I was able to do it just fine, but it was not pleasant, especially since I had to give myself the injections at work because it had to be at a certain time every single day. So I literally went into my car and gave myself a shot in the stomach. And then the last medication I only took once. It was for the night before. The doctor kind of described it as like pulling the trigger. And then after doing all those injections and having all those doctor's visits, I finally went in for the surgery. And I was feeling like shit at that point because all the hormones were making me really bloated because they were like making my ovaries swell up, I guess. I was just really uncomfortable. But the surgery went okay. They were actually really shocked because they were able to harvest 100 eggs. To put that into perspective, the average amount of eggs that are harvested during this type of surgery is 10 to 20. So somehow they were able to get 100 eggs, and 75 of those eggs were mature, so they could be used at a later date after being frozen. And that was crazy. I mean, I was like worried that being on testosterone would make it harder for me to actually have eggs harvested. And I was worried because I didn't want to have to go through that whole surgery just to have like 5 eggs harvested, and it's not guaranteed that every egg is going to work when fertilized. So I was nervous about that, but I mean, now I have 75 eggs frozen, so that's 75 chances at having a kid in the future. So I would say that my chances are pretty good for it working. I went home that same day. I wasn't really in a lot of pain. They prescribed me pain medication, but I don't think I took any. The most pain I was feeling was some tenderness in my stomach, but it honestly wasn't that bad. I skipped school that day and the day afterwards afterwards because I was just feeling kind of tender and I wanted to take it easy pretty much. So I was doing everything they told me to do. They were telling me to drink a lot of Gatorade and eat salty foods. I don't really know why they were telling me to do that. There's probably some reasoning, but I forgot it. But I was drinking my Gatorade and waiting for myself to recover. And after a couple days, I was feeling okay, so I went to work, but I was still like really bloated and I didn't know why. And I thought that it was just gonna wear off. But it didn't. With each day, I started feeling worse and worse until I was feeling worse than I did right after the surgery. And I was like, what is going on? I think it was around a week later that I woke up pretty early in the morning feeling really nauseous. So I had to run to my bathroom to throw up. And at that point, I knew that something was definitely wrong because they told me if I had any like extreme nausea or vomiting, then something wasn't right and I would have to call them. So I had to call out of work that day and I was feeling so nauseous that I had to call my dad and tell him to come pick me up and bring me to the doctor. And he lived an hour away and the doctor was only like 20 minutes away from where I was, but I was feeling so shitty that I couldn't even bring myself to drive. So my dad got to the apartment and I literally could barely make it from my apartment on the second floor down the elevator to his car without throwing up. Like, I don't think I've ever been that nauseous in my whole life. And as soon as I got into his car, I was like, do you have a bag or something that I could throw up in? And luckily he did. He had like a plastic bag. And I didn't have anything in my stomach at that point. I had some Gatorade the night before, but because I was so bloated, it was like pushing down on my stomach, so I wasn't hungry at all and I hadn't been eating anything. So I was just like dry heaving into this bag the whole way to the doctor's. And when I finally got there, they hooked me up to an IV and started giving me this medicine for nausea, and that helped, but they kept like poking and prodding me on my stomach, and that was just making everything worse, and I wanted to die. And they had to do an ultrasound, which they had to do a ton of ultrasounds the whole time, like the whole process, and it was terrible every single time. It never got better, especially that time because I was in so much pain. But they had to do the ultrasound to like look at my ovaries and see what was going on, and basically my ovaries were like enormous. So basically what they told me is that I had developed a syndrome from the hormones that I've been taking before the surgery. It's called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and basically it's a reaction to excess hormones, and it's usually in response to people who take hormones to stimulate egg development in their ovaries, which is what I was doing. There's not a very high chance of it happening during this surgery process, but unfortunately the chances are not zero, so it happened to me. And there's an even smaller chance of having to be hospitalized because of it. So lucky me, I was also in that percentile. Yeah, basically they told me that I had to go to the hospital because my weight gain was so severe because I was so bloated. I literally gained like, I think almost 10 pounds just because I was so bloated. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I'm telling you that I literally looked pregnant. It was horrifying. I had never seen my body look like that ever. Like, I've been bloated before. I mean, we've all been bloated before, but this took it to a new level. They made it seem like I had to take an ambulance to the hospital, even though the hospital was only like a mile away or maybe even less, but they acted like I didn't have a choice, and they put me on a stretcher and had some dudes in the ambulance, you know, come bring me out of the doctor's office. And meanwhile, everyone in the doctor's office is staring at me because first of all, I'm on a stretcher being carried to an ambulance, and second of all, I'm a dude in a center for reproductive services, which is something that I had to deal with every time I went in for an appointment because, I mean, sometimes there were guys there, but they were usually there in support of their wives who were getting like IVF or whatever. So that was just, you know, the icing on the cake. But I didn't really care because I was in a lot of pain and they just took me to the ambulance, and it was the first time that I've ever ridden an ambulance like in the back. They were like sticking all these weird things on me and checking all my levels and all this stuff. And that 1 mile ambulance ride to the hospital was $1,200. Shout out to American Healthcare. So I finally got to the emergency room and I was waiting there for a while, and eventually they moved me to my own room, which was weirdly on the oncology floor. So the next youngest person on that floor other than me was like 65. So they took me to my room and basically told me that my ovaries were, I guess, releasing a hormone that was basically causing internal bleeding in my abdomen, and that's why I was bloating up so much. And so they said that they had to drain it out. And I was like, okay, so you're gonna put me to sleep for that, right? And they were like, no. And they took me to this room, took this super long needle and stuck it right into my side to numb up the area. And then basically they took like a straw kind of thing and stuck it in my side and just drained all the fluid out of my abdomen. I was literally just sitting there for like 20 minutes watching all the fluid go through the straw into this like container. And once it finally was done, it measured up to, I think, like 2 liters. 2 liters, 2 liters of fluid in my stomach. And I did feel a lot better after they did that, but I still was not feeling 100%. And we're still dealing with the issue of the fact that my abdomen was constantly being filled up with this fluid. And basically they gave me some medicine for it, but it's just something that I had to wait out. They had me chugging Gatorade because I guess that would flush out my system. I don't really know why they were making me do that, but I was in so much pain the whole time. I was so nauseous, I was really bloated, and I had absolutely no appetite. So even drinking the Gatorade was like torture for me. I had to stay in the hospital for 4 days. They had to drain the fluid out of my abdomen twice. I could barely eat. I literally didn't eat that whole time, maybe a little bit of the hospital food, but I was just so nauseous the whole time that I had no appetite. And they kept coming in like every 2 hours to check my blood pressure, blood work, all this other stuff. And they said that they couldn't let me go until it looked like the issue was starting to subside. And that took 4 days. So I was just chilling in a hospital bed for 4 days and it sucked. And to top it all off, it was right during finals. So I missed all my finals. I had to get incompletes in all my classes and I had to end up doing my finals over winter break. And when they finally released me from the hospital, I was still like incredibly bloated. And the pain medication that they gave me made it so that I was really backed up and essentially I couldn't take a shit. Sorry if that's TMI, but it was all part of the experience. But I was showing signs of improvement, which is why they let me out of the hospital. And they told me that I had to drink 2 liters of Gatorade a day and weigh myself every day. And they also had to monitor how much I was peeing, because I think one of the biggest reasons why they weren't letting me out of the hospital was because I wasn't peeing a lot, which means the fluid wasn't flushing itself out of my body. So every time I had to piss at the hospital, they made me piss in this like little bucket thing that went on the toilet seat that measured up like how many milliliters it was, and they wouldn't let me go until it reached a certain amount. And even after I got out of the hospital, I still had to use that for the next like week or so and keep track of my weight to see that the fluid was actually like leaving my body and it wasn't building up anymore. And after a week, it did finally go down. The bloating went down. Like literally, I have a picture of what I looked like when I first left the hospital versus what I looked like a week later. I literally lost like 20 pounds. I think I was around 140 before it all began, and then I went up to 160 at the highest point when I was really bloated, and then I gradually kept losing more and more weight until I was like around 120 because I hadn't been eating. I felt like shit. I lost all the weight that the fluid gave me and then some, which I mean I'm not really complaining about because I was a little chunky before, but I wish that I could have lost weight by normal means and not by being in the hospital. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that happened. I'm glad that despite everything, I'm okay now. And if anyone watching this is considering getting this surgery, don't let this deter you. There's a very low chance that this is going to happen to you. Just because it happened to me doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. I haven't heard of it happening to any other trans guy, so I just got lucky, I guess. And I also got lucky by having double the medical bills, which I only just paid off, by the way. A year later. And what's even better is that a couple months ago I had a hysterectomy, and then I also had complications that landed me in the hospital. But if you guys want to hear that story, I can make another separate video because it is an entirely different can of worms. But I did get what I wanted. My eggs are frozen, all 75 of them, and I do have to pay like $500 a year to keep them on ice, but at least I have the option. And I will say that after everything, I was kind of regretting even doing the surgery because I was like, this isn't even worth it. Like, what if I don't even want to have kids later on? What if I don't want to have biological kids? But what's done is done. I already drained my savings account on it, so hopefully in the future I can actually use them. But that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, you can just comment down below, or if you have any other video suggestions, I will gladly take them. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.